Now it's time to hear the stories of Utes in their own words. This is Utes Insider presented by Pepsi. Here's your host, Mike Legasholt.
Welcome to the program, and thanks for joining us. As we record this show on July 9th, the world of pro sports continues to make its return. Last week, we talked with former Utes soccer player Holly DeGurda about the comeback of women's pro soccer. And with Major League Baseball getting its season started on July 23rd, I decided it was time to talk some baseball. Former U pitcher Stephen Fife, who played at the U from 2007 until 2008, was taken in the third round of the draft by the Boston Red Sox in 2008. He spent the next 11 years in pro ball, including parts of 3 seasons with the LA Dodgers. So as someone who recently concluded his career and is still connected with people in the game, I want to get his perspective on baseball's comeback, the 60-game season, and some other changes we will see this year. Also, he's someone who played in the Little League World Series. He was a member of Idaho's first team to get to Williamsport, Pennsylvania. He was a part of the early years of Bill Kinderberg's tenure at Utah, and his journey from pro ball took him everywhere from the lowest levels of the minors all the way to the show, even over to Japan for a half season. So I wanted to hear of some of his stories, and I hope you enjoy them as well. Former Utah pitcher Stephen Fife coming up in this edition of Utes Insider, presented by Pepsi, in just a moment.
To hear more episodes of this show and other Utah athletics podcasts, search for them on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Now back to more of Utes Insider presented by Pepsi.
Welcome back, and pleased to be joined by one of the former Utes who's made his way to the big leagues during his professional baseball career, Stephen Fife, who towed the rubber for the Utes from 2007 to 2008 and just recently finished up his long career in pro ball of over 10 years. And Stephen Fife, who now makes his home in Boise, Idaho, joining us this afternoon. Stephen, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
We'll go over your Utah career and as well as your stints in the majors with the Dodgers, and also talk about your career in pro ball that was also some time in Japan. But let's go back to your background first, Stephen. You grew up in Boise, Idaho, and you are one of the rare baseball players who lives out the dream of actually playing in the Little League World Series. You went there in 1999. You were the first Idaho team to ever get to Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So let's start there. I mean, to be a kid growing up playing baseball from who knows what age up through your early teens to make the Little League World Series, what was that like for you back in 1999?
No, it was awesome. I was actually not one of the better players on the team. I was kind of towards the bottom. I batted ninth and played second base, so they kind of hid me there. But I was surrounded by a lot of really, really good, who are still buddies of mine now, but better players than I. And we had great coaches and found ourselves continually kind of towards the top of the Idaho ranks, and definitely was a blessing, and things kind of came our way to be able to get to the Western region in San Bernardino and end up winning that. And moving on to Williamsport back before they did 8 teams in the U.S., there was only 4. So,
oh, wow.
Definitely was a kind of a miracle in the making type of thing, and definitely enjoyed it immensely, and remember it, and still have very good friends going all the way back to when we were 9 years old and started playing together.
Yeah, it's fun to talk to guys who played ball growing up and again, to see that dream come true to make it to Williamsport. I had forgotten that there were fewer teams to go at that point. As you mentioned, just 4. And the West region itself is very, very difficult to get through. And anything out west is tough to get through. I mean, you have the California teams and just a lot of talent out west. Who did you guys beat to get to Williamsport?
To get there, we played Montana, Washington. I think we played Washington, or was it Oregon? We played Montana, Washington, Oregon. I think we played Oregon twice, and then we played Northern California in the final.
Okay.
So they separated that. Back then, they separated like the north half of the West to the south half of the West. So I think in our bracket was Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Utah. And I think maybe Nevada was in our group.
Okay.
And the Californias were in the other one with New Mexico, Arizona. Maybe Nevada was in there. Anyway, but it was an interesting deal. But yeah, we played Montana, Oregon twice, and Northern California. And I think we played Washington as well.
Okay. Still just a great run. Anybody of note that you guys played against that maybe made to the majors? I mean, it's kind of funny to look at some of these rosters, and there's these names that are pretty well known now. Anybody that you came across that was of note back in '99?
Yeah, well, Not necessarily in the Western region, but in the Little League World Series for sure. Well, everybody knows Todd Frazier. He was there the year before, so his team was there. The East was there the year after. The same team without him. And from that team, a kid named Kevin Munson was on that. Or no, was it Munson? I think it was Kevin Munson. Anyway, there was a reliever from the East that was there, and then the Southern team was really the team that had a lot of players on it. And Colby and Corey Rasmus were the brothers there. So
okay.
Obviously Colby played for, center field for the Cardinals and Blue Jays, etc. And then Corey was a reliever for the Braves and I think the Angels. And then Lance Lynn was on the Central team. He's still pitching. Yeah, he's with the Twins now, Cardinals. And then me, I think I was the only one from the West. And then I don't think there was anybody from an international team that was on there, but I want to say there might have been one from Canada.
Okay. Always fun to look back at that stuff. I mean, what a ride. Can you describe the level of excitement when you guys clinched the berth to Williamsport?
Yeah, I mean, it was a late night, right? I mean, we had it just seemed so late for us. I mean, I want to say that the game time was like 8 or 9 p.m. It was on ESPN. They kept us pretty secluded though. So we didn't have a ton of idea other than winning, and then they had all these posters printed of us right after we won it. We were all just kind of in shock at all these fans, and there was probably, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 people there maybe, but we signed autographs of our own posters that we didn't know were even made for like an hour or two after the game ended, and there was interviews and, media and stuff there. And obviously back in '99 is a different animal, but it was really cool. And then, we lived in like these army barracks while we were in the Western region, and they didn't really have TVs or any kind of entertainment outside of a pool, some pool tables, some ping pong tables. And so we just kind of lived secluded there for a while. I don't think many of us on our team really realized what was happening until we got to Williamsport, and we were actually in a kind of a similar situation there with some dorms. And we went over to the food hall where they had some Nintendos and ping pong tables, etc. And they had a couple TVs in there with cable. And we were in there, I think one of our first days there, and there was like a pre Little League World Series thing going on. And we turned around on the TV was ESPN, and they were playing the interview and some highlights from games prior played of the field right out in front of us. And we all kind of looked at each other like, wow, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's the field they're broadcasting right now as we're sitting right here. There it is. And I think that's the first time we all realized that like we'd kind of gotten to a place that nobody thought we'd actually get.
Very, very cool. So that was back in 1999. Let's flash forward now to your senior year from Bora High School, 2005. And you led your team to the 5A state title. And then it was time to decide where to go to college. You went to Everett Community College, north of Seattle, before coming to Utah. What made you decide to start things out at Everett during your college career?
Yeah, kind of an interesting process there, right? I mean, I was actually kind of a quarterback of sorts, and planned to actually play college football. And then I ended up getting a concussion and it didn't work out in football. So I started to kind of focus on baseball. I actually first signed at Salt Lake Community College.
Okay.
And then ended up, I didn't really decommit, but the coach didn't really keep track of me down there. And I went, I don't know, like 4 months without even speaking to the guy, and played a whole high school season and never heard from him. And my cousin, who played at College of Idaho, which was then Albertson College, played with a guy who was the head coach at Everett, and didn't have a ton of offers. Had a few opportunities to go to a few different junior colleges and either walk on or get a small scholarship, but decided that kind of with an agreement in place that I would try to leave Everett after 1 year and not do 2 years at a junior college, just because I was after the education of a D1 college. And so that's how I ended up at Everett. Was Levi Lacey was a teammate of my cousin Jason Nilsson, and they won the NAIA World Series back in their time, and ended up choosing to go up there and live with my aunt and go to junior college for a year before Coach Conger and Coach Kinneberg decided to offer me a scholarship and fly me down for an official visit. And I signed with Utah when I went to that visit.
How about that? I mean, you hear of guys who make Division I and do well, who start out at the JUCO ranks, but they have someone who made as far as the major leagues start out at the JUCO ranks. That's a little bit more rare. I mean, so if I'm listening to you correctly, it sounds like the fact that you were pretty serious about football maybe held you back a little bit in high school and maybe kind of held the recruiters off a little bit? Is that how it played out?
Well, more just that Boise is not exactly the hub of all talent. So not a lot of attention in terms of scouts and such coming from really anywhere, whether it be pro scouts or, Division I type scouts coming to look at the talent here in Boise, at least when I was in high school, and bring guys out. So kind of a lack of exposure really is what kind of led to, not a whole lot of attention. I did speak to the University of Utah. In fact, Coach Conger came to a camp here in Caldwell, Idaho that I attended, a pitching camp. And we actually spoke my senior year about me going to Utah straight out of high school. And they ended up having to offer a scholarship to somebody else and didn't have room for me. And therefore, I decided to move on from that dream of D1 out of high school and go to Everett. And then ended up still linking up with Coach Conger with some familiarity and heading back to Utah where I wanted to go out of high school.
So it all worked out for you. After 1 year at Everett, you then end up at Utah, and you mentioned meeting Coach Bill Kinderberg at a camp. What was it about Bill that stood out to you and eventually Brian Conger that made you think, Utah's a good place for me to play my college ball?
Yeah, I think it was definitely more along the sides of Coach Conger than it was Coach K, and not that Coach K was uninvolved or unimpressionable, but Coach Conger was the one doing the camps, and so I got to spend multiple days with him as a senior in high school, and kind of work with him pitching and learning mechanics, etc. And then he was the one doing the recruiting, obviously, as well when I was in junior college. And so my familiarity was really with him. And then on the visit, obviously, Coach K was great. I liked that he had a professional. He'd done some coaching with the White Sox. There have been some players recently. Ryan Corey was drafted, I think, the year before.
Right.
And was kind of a stud when I went on my visit. So there were some things pointing in the right direction. I thought from the upside standpoint, and then a lot of it came down for me to cost and my perception of being able to come in and play right away. So a couple of the other options that were on the table was like Pepperdine and University of Arizona, Gonzaga, and those schools were either really cost prohibitive or I didn't feel like I could go to Arizona and walk in and play. I felt like I'd spend a year or two trying to refine my skills and hopefully find my way on the field as a redshirt junior or senior.
Well, it all worked out pretty well. So you pitched in 17 games in 2007. You became a starter by the end of the year, 6-2 record. And then in 2008, the numbers really improved. 7-5 record, 3.72 ERA. You had a team high 78 Ks to just 29 walks in 92 innings. That's a heck of a ratio. And teams hit just 252 against you. So, obviously the Utah program, especially at that point, was not great. It was a northern school, which is always challenging. And of course, had you stuck around one more year, you would have been a part of a chance to go to NCAAs, but you had a chance to go pro. So obviously a good decision. But at that point in the Utah program, as I said, it was definitely growing under Bill Kinderberg as he came back for the second time, and you got a chance to play a prominent role. At what point during your stay at Utah did you think, maybe I've got a chance to pitch beyond college? At what point did that sink in for you?
Boy, it didn't really sink in too far until I faced Steven Strasburg at San Diego State on a Thursday night. We had like this fall showcase, and I had a few clubs asked me to fill out, some draft questionnaires. I think I did like 6 or 8 of them. But most projections were that, and Coach K is pretty good about it, kind of setting the expectation of the player and help me understand that, there's a chance that I could play pro ball in the fall. Here's some questionnaires to fill out. They're thinking of you in, maybe round 10 or later. And that was fine. And I thought there was a real possibility, but in those rounds and at the values placed on players drafted that late, I definitely thought I'd come back for my senior year. And then, it was kind of a crazy thing. Steven Strasburg was sick the week before and was a sophomore at San Diego State, wasn't draft eligible, had the flu, didn't pitch the week before. And so they lined him up to, I believe he moved from a Sunday start to the Thursday night start. So It wasn't a full 2 weeks off for him. And on the Wednesday travel day before he went down there, Coach K pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I think we're going to pull you back and we'll pitch you on Friday and keep you on Fridays. And, they're going to throw their stud on Thursday. So maybe we'll we'll kind of concede a little bit and try to win the series with a Saturday win.
Okay.
And so I was kind of caught off guard because I was thinking I was going to pitch Thursday, and then we got landed and got to the hotel, and I believe it was the next morning after breakfast. Coach K pulled me aside and he said, "Now you're going to start tonight. We're gonna let you go against their ace and see what we can do." And so it just so happened that it was Steven Strasburg, who was already the consensus number one for the 2009 draft, on a Thursday night where scouts essentially have nothing else to go do. And so they came to watch this kid pitch, and I teed off against him, and there was probably 40 to 50 pro scouts with their guns and bags all behind the plate in San Diego, and we dueled it out. I think we lost that game 1-0. Steven went 9 innings, complete game. I think I went like 7.1, 7 1/3. He punched out 23. I think I tied the school record and punched out 12, and we lost on an unearned run in the 7th inning, and final score 1-0, and everything kind of took off from there for me from a professional standpoint.
I remember that game, not to bring it up. I didn't remember all the details like you did, obviously, but I do remember that taking place, and Strasburg obviously was, as you said, the guy at that point and could not go in the draft in 08. So you had that big start in front of the scouts, and you ended up being a 3rd-round draft pick by the Boston Red Sox. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. But, going back to your time at Utah, what did Brian Conger and Bill Kinderberg do for you that helped you the most to become a pro player during those 2 years with the Utes?
Boy, a lot of development from almost every aspect. I came in probably from junior college being probably a low to mid 80s guy, but just kind of really foundational, basic mechanics. And they both, instilled, real pitching mechanics of using the lower half and addressing that, along with, John Webster as well. I mean, in developing me physically with his strength program. So they definitely physically getting stronger, mechanically getting refined and appropriate, really. I mean, going from kind of a thrower to a pitcher, and then the mental game as well was all significant upgrades to what I had experienced in junior college, and somewhat along the lines of what my coach in high school had taught, but obviously to a much greater extent. And those building blocks really are what allowed me to prosper. I had decent fundamentals and work ethic, but without their direction, without their coaching, really, I would have never been able to explore the physical abilities that were in my body that I didn't know were there.
Busy with Stephen Fife, who played for the Utes from 2007 until 2008. He had a long pro career from 08 to 18. So, Stephen, as I mentioned, Utah, a northern school in the Mountain West, not a hotbed of pro prospects, but it's interesting. After you were drafted in 08, Utah now has had 11 players taken in the first 10 rounds of the MLB Draft. So you were kind of the guy who got this train moving. You went 3rd round to Boston in the 08 draft. Obviously, you get a feel for what's going on, but were you surprised you went that high to go in the 3rd round in that 08 draft?
Yeah, I don't. The draft is a funny thing, right? I don't really know where I expected to go. I knew that I was going to go on the first day.
Yep. I
had been called a couple times by a few different scouts days leading up to the draft, and some gave me kind of projections. They can't give you, hey, we think we're going to get you here, but they call and ask you, will you take X amount at X spot? And I definitely had the White Sox, the Red Sox, the Royals. There was a few clubs that called and kind of gave me those scenarios. So I had a feeling that I was going to fall anywhere between the supplemental, 1st round supplemental to, at the latest, the 3rd round. So nothing was really a surprise. I honestly thought on draft day that the next pick after the Red Sox was the White Sox, and they were pretty enamored, and I had spoken at length with one of their scouts multiple times, not to mention the late Howard Nakagama, who was the Bees scorekeeper, and his nephew was on the team with me, Nick Nakagama.
Yep.
He was a White Sox bird dog scout. So he got on to me early, and John Kazanis was the area scout, and I thought the next pick, which is the 9th pick in the 3rd round, was the White Sox, and I thought that's where I was going to go. So I was actually a little surprised when the Red Sox picked me, even though they had called me a few days before and given me their scenarios, I thought that they had kind of gone past where they told me that they would pick me and had moved on from me. So all was good, though. It was an incredible day. I mean, we did it here locally in Meridian and had a little draft party, and a bunch of friends and family and former teammates and high school buddies all came out, and it was a pretty unique day.
What was that moment like for you? I mean, you dream about it, you think about it, you know it's coming, but still to hear your name called in the Major League Baseball draft, and you're going third round to the Boston Red Sox. What was that moment like for you?
I don't know. I kind of have coined a lot of these moments kind of a glimpse of a dream come true, right? Like, I mean, that's the first step of a dream becoming a reality. And, that's definitely how I viewed that day. It was awesome. There was emotions and, tears and hugs and high fives. And, of course I was 21, so there was some beers drank and all that kind of stuff. It was an unbelievable day. My grandparents were there, my parents were there, my siblings were there. Like I said, my buddies. I mean, it was the start of the dream, and obviously, part of it definitely a dream come true, right? I mean, you hear your name called, you're going to the Boston Red Sox, and then start working out the contract negotiation portions and get on a plane and head to Boston. And it was an incredible journey and definitely a great start to my life in professional baseball.
So you certainly paid your dues in the minors. You spent the 08-09 seasons in Class A in the Red Sox organization. In 2010, you go to Double-A, and then eventually you were traded to the Dodgers. But, in your time with Boston, did they give you a sense at any point that, hey, we think you've got a chance to make the show or not? I mean, what was kind of the word you got from the Red Sox organization as you worked your way up through their system?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience with them. Without going into too crazy of stories, but it was a good experience. I got drafted third round. I was tagged a prospect. I had good success in short season. I got hurt my first spring. I was trying way too hard to do way too much in spring training without really understanding what spring training was. And that is a ramp up to the season. So I kind of got put on the wrong list when I got hurt in my first spring training. I had some shoulder issues, and it was Double-A 2010 when I had a really good first half. I think I was an all-star that year, and they said that they were trying to get me to Triple-A, and then I played the rest of the season at Double-A without a call to Triple-A. And then I got sent back to back to Double-A in 2011 and continued to dominate, and really had a breakout year 2011 where I felt like, what am I doing here? I was on a really, really bad team. And I think, if I remember right, I think we had won something like 14 games at the All-Star break, and I had 11 wins on my record.
Wow.
Something like that. So we were a really, really bad team, and I was really the only pitcher that gave us a chance to win, going in there and still had, was hearing the same things from the Red Sox that, yeah, we're looking for a spot for you. We're trying to make room. But you just got to keep working down here. And so, obviously when the trade deadline came around in 2011, I was really hoping that I would get traded. Every player in minor league baseball that's not moving and having a somewhat decent year is hoping to get traded. And so I kind of got sarcastic with it and realized that it was a real long shot for me to get actually traded, as we were all paying attention to the Red Sox rumors. And then, it was a late June night, and came in from charting in the stands and got the news and called into the manager's office, and me and Tim Fedorovich were headed to the Dodgers. So that was a pretty wild time, but my time as a Red Sox was great. I have still to this day some of my best teammates and best friends are from those years of coming up through that system, and still some of the coaches there are some of my favorites, and I keep in touch with some of them as well. But it was a great experience being with the Red Sox. Enjoyed it thoroughly, and super grateful to have played for such a dynamic organization.
So parts of 4 years then with the Red Sox, you get traded to the LA Dodgers in 2011, a 3-team trade that also involved the Seattle Mariners. So you join the Dodgers, you go to their AA affiliate in Chattanooga. You have a 3-1 record, ERA just above 4 that year, and then you get placed on the 40-man roster, which is a way to protect you from the Rule 5 draft. You went to AAA Albuquerque in 2012. At that point, you thought, okay, I was traded for a reason. The Dodgers want me. I'm a AAA. Did you go into that 2012 season thinking maybe this is my year to finally get that major league call up?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. 100%. I mean, I had it, and again, here comes another interesting kind of dynamic of it. When I got after the 2011 season, I went to the fall league and got introduced to some of the Dodger pitching development guys, and they asked me to make some kind of substantial changes that really weren't in my best interest, but were kind of within the model that they had going. And it was kind of a stamp that got put on me, or a mold, I guess, that they asked me to kind of fit into. And so I had a really rough fall league. And then I went to big league spring training and had a good start, and expected, obviously worked hard all off season to try to make sure that I presented the opportunity to actually, make good on getting on the 40-man roster. So definitely went into that season thinking this is going to be kind of a make or break year. I'm either going to succeed and get a chance, or if I fall off the wagon here, this is, the beginning of the end. And so that year actually started off pretty horrifically. I think my first 5 starts, I never made it out of the 4th inning. Ton of walks, was still trying to sink the ball. We were in altitude. Things just really were, I was up against it in a really bad way. And got sat down by a veteran catcher named Josh Bard, who most recently was the bench coach for the New York Yankees. And he let me have it in a good way, in a Coach Collinger, Coach Kinneberg type of way of being bluntly honest and letting me know that what I was doing was not good enough and that I needed to improve. And from that point, picked it up and actually got the call a couple months later in June and flew out to LA and started against the Phillies for my debut.
Yeah, so I believe July 17th, 2012, you make your first start against the Phillies with the Dodgers. You go 6 innings, allowing just 1 run. 11 ground ball outs was kind of your thing, and left the game to lead. No decision, unfortunately, for you. The bullpen blew it for you, but let's talk about that. I mean, you talk about your highest of highs, the fulfillment of another dream. You get drafted, now your chance to go pitch in the majors, and you get that call that you're going to pitch for the Dodgers. Walk us through how you found out about it and just your emotions during that 24-hour stretch of going from AAA to the majors.
Absolutely, yeah. So I was supposed to pitch in Albuquerque, and we were there, and I got called in a couple hours before the start. So I usually showed up, I usually showed up for starts about 3 o'clock, whereas normally I would show up about 1 o'clock. So I was not yet at the field, and Coach Glenn Dishman, pitching coach, called me and said, "Hey, Pfeiffer, you got to get down here. You're not pitching tonight." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, pitcher stretch in 20 minutes or whatever it was, and you're not here, so just get down here, get loose, but you're not pitching tonight. I need you to, come out, play catch, and you're on hold," is what they would call it. So after the game, Lo Bundy called me in the office and let me know I was headed from Albuquerque to LA. Had a little bit of an inkling before, right? I mean, you're on hold for a reason,
right?
Kind of known in a AAA clubhouse. So, text my parents, and my fiance at that time? Yeah, I think still fiance. Yeah, we didn't get married till that. So fiance at that time, and whoever else, and said, "Hey, I'm on hold. If all things go well, or whoever got hurt or whatever's happening in the big leagues, I'll be pitching in LA in the near, next 24, 48 hours. So after the game, Lo let me know that I was headed to LA in the morning, and, obviously not a ton of sleep that night and a ton of excitement and a lot of phone calls and texts and that whole thing. And then, jumped on a plane, flew first class from Albuquerque to LA and walked into Dodger Stadium for the first time as a professional, as a big leaguer.
Describe that moment. I mean, you talk about your cathedrals of baseball, Yankee Stadium and Dodger Stadium are probably 1 and 2. Just talk about your emotions, your thoughts as you made that first journey into Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little bit of familiarity because the Dodgers did an off-season camp, kind of a group of 10 or 12 of us that were, speculated to possibly make debuts that year. And so there was a little bit of familiarity with Dodger Stadium, but in terms of, driving up to the stadium and walking in and going down to the locker room and walking into, the old locker room, which was chain link fence and super long and narrow, and having your name up on above a locker and, put your bag down and the lineups on your chair. Really surreal. I mean, as we're talking about, obviously I'm having a lot of flashbacks of what all those visuals were. And then, preparing for the game, right? I mean, I get the lineup. The Phillies, I think the year before, maybe 2 years before, it won the World Series, and it was a lot of the same guys. So you had Victorino or Jimmy Rollins leading off, and Victorino in the 2-hole, and you had Howard and Young was in the lineup, and it was just crazy. And then you get down to the bottom, and it was supposed to be Cliff Lee. So Cliff Lee was penciled in to pitch that night, former Cy Young Award winner. Looked at that and was kind of like, wow. And then about an hour before the game, they changed the lineup. New lineup comes in, and the only thing to change on the lineup was the pitcher went from Cliff Lee to Roy Halladay. So I didn't get any breaks there. Halladay was coming off the DL, and so a very, very unique situation there to go from one Hall of Famer to another, and start a debut against him. And then obviously, you get going in the game, and I can remember, playing catch in the outfield and warming up in the pen, and trying to keep things as normal and realistic as possible without getting too wild and crazy. But good buddy of mine, Kyle Weiland, who ended up getting traded from the Red Sox to Houston, but made his debut with the Red Sox, told me one thing. He said, before you throw your first pitch, give yourself 5 seconds to just look around and take it in. So I had Matt Kemp on the top step and gave him a pat on the behind, and asked him to take me out. And so he sprinted out on the field, and I remember getting my warm-ups in and then taking that brief moment and taking a look at, the stadium and everything around it, and getting a little teary, and then flushing that out and getting the first pitch off, and actually giving up. I think I gave up a run in the first inning, and bounced back from that. But it was definitely, that was the dream come true moment. I don't know his name, but Dwight from The Office announced the starting lineups and gave everybody a nickname. And I was Stephen Barney Fife pitching for the Dodgers. So that was pretty unique.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. So you get your major league call up, you make the one start, then back to AAA, and it worked out. You got called up again. So 5 total starts in 2012, 0-2 record, unfortunately for you, but a 2.7 earned run average. I mean, that's dynamite stuff. Especially as a guy who's kind of bouncing back and forth between AAA and the majors. When you got to the end of that 2012 season, as I mentioned, 5 starts in the majors, and you got your chance, kind of what was going through your mind as you look toward that 2013 season?
Well, it's definitely interesting. The Dodgers have gone through an ownership change in the late in the 2011 offseason, and then obviously they made that big acquisition of Adrian Gonzalez, Josh Beck, and Nick Punto, and a few others late in the 2012 season. And so, going into 13, my eyes were definitely on MLB Network and trade rumors and all this kind of stuff, trying to figure out what the new ownership was going to buy and who they were going to bring in and how many guys and all that kind of stuff. And so, definitely wanted to give myself a chance to make the team in 13. But after they signed Paul Maholm and Chris Capuano, and no, Cappy was already there, but they signed a bunch of guys, and pretty quickly I found myself, counting the numbers and being number 9 or number 10 on the depth chart. So pretty quickly, especially going into spring training, knew like I was going to be headed back to AAA unless there was some kind of catastrophic event of multiple injuries to multiple pitchers, and knew once again that I was going to be in the same position, but that was going to be my claim to fame, was going to be the guy that could, do what I did in 2012, which was pitch in the minors, stay healthy, pitch in the big leagues, go back to the minors, go back to the big leagues, and fill a role in that aspect.
Well, the good thing is, as a pitcher, I mean, if you're a position player, you can get behind a guy, and unless they get hurt, there's no really no chance to go to the majors and stay. But as a pitcher, You got 5 guys in your starting rotation. There's always, it seems like, injuries and a chance for a spot start. There's trades. I mean, it seems like there's more opportunities for pitchers to get up and down. And although you started the 2013 season in AAA, you were called back up and got your first major league win, June 3rd, 2013, against the Padres to get that first professional major league win. What was that like for you?
Pretty, honestly, it was pretty uneventful. If I remember right. And I'm trying to think. I think that was the game I flew from. I think we were in New York the night before. So we got rained out in New York against the Yankees. It was Don Mattingly. There's a bunch of stuff, for Donnie as his first time back in Yankee Stadium since he coached there. And then we got rained out the first day. They played a doubleheader the second day. And I flew out. I might be mistaken. This might be the second time I played the Padres, but I think this was the story. And so they flew me out after the first game. So I watched like 4 innings of the first game and grabbed a flight out of Newark and flew to San Diego ahead of the team. Well, the team ends up playing the second game. They play like 14 innings. They arrive in San Diego from New York at like 7:30 in the morning. I roll out of bed, went to breakfast. I came out to the lobby, and there was players still getting their room keys. And so I skedaddled back to my room and didn't really want to be the guy that flew out ahead of the team and was waking up as the team was arriving. But remember definitely seeing the travel secretary as I was walking out for breakfast and realizing that the boys had had a long night and they needed some relief, and they were going to sleep and be tired. And it was going to be kind of an ugly game, and ended up putting together a good game for the guys, and relieved the bullpen of quite a bit of work. And then, actually there was no celebration for me after the first win, as most of the team was exhausted and ready to head back to the hotel, and literally nobody realized that was my first win. So tradition for pitchers getting their first win is a beer bath in the shower. So they usually throw you in some sort of laundry bin, and a couple cases of beer come out, and they shake it up like a champagne type celebration and cover you in beer. I didn't get that reward, but was definitely happy that for the first time in whatever it was, 6 or 7 tries, that the bullpen didn't blow the lead that was there when I left the game.
Well, it's still pretty awesome. Unfortunate for you, the circumstances that you lost out on the big moment of the celebration, was still your first major league W. And you made 10 starts with the Dodgers in that 2013 season, 2 more games out of the bullpen, 4-4 record, 3.86 earned run average. As I've talked here, you were primarily a starter when you came up to the majors. Did anyone have a conversation maybe after 13 and say, hey, listen, if you're willing to pitch out of the pen, or we see a role for you out of the pen, you can maybe stick with the big league club? Was there ever any talk of maybe change your role to allow you to stay with the big league club for longer stints?
I certainly wish there was, but no, that conversation definitely never took place. And I was kind of always seen as a bigger, more durable type guy, and didn't ever pop the velocity numbers that were kind of being sought after out of the bullpen. Not to mention, the bullpen in LA was pretty good with a lot of names that were very successful as well. And so, I was never presented the opportunity to transition away from starting, and actually took quite a bit of pride in being a starter. And so I pursued that to its fullest extent, and ended up getting banged up pretty good in 2014, and made 1 start in Miami after they called up a guy that was on the first year 40 man. And anyway, that was a whole nother situation, but it was never presented, and I'm actually grateful for it and enjoyed my time. And my last start in the big leagues was Jose Fernandez, and I squared off in Miami.
How about that? That was the year, as you mentioned, the injury happened, and you had Tommy John surgery to end your season in August. That could be a tough moment for several reasons. 1 is it's an injury. 2, there's rehab. And 3, mentally, that could be hard to overcome. And for some guys, that is the end. When they just can't come back, or the organization says, well, he's maybe a guy who's been up and down. We've got others to take his spot. We maybe move on. As you had your surgery late in the 14th season, did you have concerns that maybe that was going to be it with your time with the Dodgers? What was going through your mind at that point?
Yeah, I think, all those things you named, right, of it just being disappointing. I think the most disappointing thing was that was my third year on the option on the 40-man. So in 2015, had I been a Dodger and gone to spring training with the Dodgers in 2015, I would have had to make the team I would have been out of options. And so that was definitely the most devastating, is that I kind of built a resume that I was somewhat reliable until the injury in 14, and that, I was a capable major leaguer, and that there would have been a team out there for me if it hadn't been the Dodgers, to really establish myself as a major league pitcher. And so the injury couldn't have come at a worse time, for me. And there was, plenty of emotion along with it. Had a feeling that, come the time to reset the rosters and bring more guys on 40-man, that given that I had just had surgery in August, that, I wasn't going to likely play in 2015, which I ended up not playing, that, there wasn't really going to be a spot for me. So it turned out to be kind of a storm of super unfortunate things. And I go from being a major league pitcher in 2014 to being a bartender at the Melting Pot in 2015 in order to collect workers' compensation in the state of Arizona where we were living. So definitely a whirlwind of events. And I guess as I'll always say to the end of my time, is that baseball will find a way to humble you. And maybe I got too high on the horse. I don't know. I hope people don't think that of me, but I had a good run, and then it came to a screeching halt, and I was literally stirring cheese at the Melting Pot and bartending the 2015 from summer through the end of the winter before I went to go play winter ball in Venezuela.
Wow, how about that? You talk about one environment to something completely different, from the majors to a bartender. Did you ever think about hanging it up at that point? As I mentioned, you get injured. There's the injury, there's surgery, there's rehab, there's the mental aspect. At that point, during that 15 season, when you're tending bar, do you think maybe I'm done?
No, that never really played for me. I was super committed to the game and baseball, and had it being in Arizona, having been living there was plenty of people at the spot that I was rehabbing that, kept me in the baseball mindset. And I rehabbed with many guys who I played with, new guys that I'd never played with, and then ended up working out some of the off season with some larger names that were in Arizona for that off season. And so shutting it down really wasn't an option. In fact, getting to Venezuela in October and November and playing there and kind of getting my feet back on the ground and get back to pitching really got me back on track. And then preparing for spring training and then signing with the Cubs that off season was definitely a boon, and felt like I had life and was ready to get back to pitching.
So you spend the 16 season with the Iowa Cubs, the Chicago Cubs AAA affiliate, and then you were actually signed with the Marlins that next offseason, and then you get released on June 16th of 2017, and you go over to Japan. I want to talk to you about this a little bit. It's always a tough transition to play overseas with the language differences and so forth, but you never got a chance to really get settled. It's mid-year. You jump over there and play from June until October. Just talk to us about the decision to go to Japan and what that experience was like for you in 2017.
Right. So my goal kind of after surgery and realizing that, I was, especially after the 16 season or even during the 16 season, talking to multiple guys who'd played in Japan and Korea and kind of having been the 4A guy for the Dodgers, it was like, man, I would really like the opportunity to play over in Asia and play for guaranteed money and get a chance to, make as much money as I can, because that's the goal. Once you get past, getting drafted, the goal is how much money can I make before, things fall off. The wheels fall off the wagon, if you will.
Yep.
So getting the opportunity in 17, actually in 16, I was with the Cubs. I was about to get signed by the Yomiuri Giants out of Japan and strained my oblique. I got offered the money and we were negotiating the contract in the morning, and I pitched that night and strained my oblique that night, and that deal went away in 16. So
oh, wow.
I kind of already had the fever in 16 to go over to Japan, and then was presented the opportunity again in 17. And technically, you're right, I was released from the Marlins, but from a more substantial point of view, my contract was purchased by the team that bought me. in Japan, which was the Seibu Lions. So got the opportunity to go over there. It had become the goal, basically after, 2014, 2015, kind of analyzing who I was as a pitcher, where I fit. And then I thought that was the best opportunity for me. So I had my agent kind of start to pursue those opportunities for me, and signing there was, an answer to prayer and really a huge opportunity for me to go make guaranteed money in Japan. And it went fairly well, but there's definitely many things that weren't in my favor in getting over there. And I enjoyed the heck out of my time. Wish I would have spent the rest of my career over there, but it was a great experience and definitely a different way of life, both socially and baseball.
So any thoughts then? It sounds like you enjoyed your time in Japan. What prevented you from spending more time over there?
There was some stuff that was out of my control. There was a kind of a rift so in Japan, the manager controls everything. The GM and scouts are just kind of forms of input.
Okay.
And so there was a big signing. They signed a guy named Ernesto Mejia, who was a Braves minor league farmhand, went over to Japan in 2016 and ended up being the home run king over there, which is a huge deal. And so after that season, they signed him to I think it was a 3-year, $15 million deal, which was one of the biggest in all of Japanese baseball. And then he came to spring training out of shape and hit 200 for the first half of the year. So he got his money and essentially didn't turn in any work after that.
Yeah.
And so there was a rift between the manager and the scouts and the GM. And so when I got brought in, I was just kind of the next guy that he didn't really want anything to do with. And so I got put in some tough spots to pitch in. In Japan, they play not only in major league stadiums, but they play in farm community type stadiums. And those games are generally reserved for Japanese players almost specifically. Usually Americans foreign players don't even travel to those games. And I got to pitch in one of those stadiums where it's like a muni stadium, right? It was 240 feet down the lines and 370 feet to center. And I gave up 2 home runs that were fence scrapers, both of them. And after that, the manager really didn't want to have anything to do with me. So it was just kind of some unfortunate events. And then, like you said, the language barrier, somehow it translated. And this came from an American pitcher that I played with. They translated my cutter as being a 2-seamer. And so when I went into pitch in the games, they tell you kind of don't disrespect the catcher or the scouting report. They know what you do. They've studied the stuff. You just need to throw what they put down. And so my first couple outings with the catcher in the major leagues of Japan, they asked me to throw sinkers and sliders, which was neither of which were my primary pitches. So I threw a cut fastball, 4-seam cut fastball, and a curveball and a changeup. And they had me throw 2-seamers and sliders, which were not my cup of tea. And it just didn't produce the results that were beneficial. And that's why I wish I would have gone to spring training in 2018 and had the opportunity to show them kind of what my repertoire really was, because doing it on the fly in the middle of the season was not beneficial to me as a professional.
Wow, that's crazy to realize just that the translation and so forth just impacted you that much with your career over there. I mean, that's crazy to think about. So you wrap up the 17 season over there in Japan. You decide to come back, and you sign a minor league deal with the Cleveland Indians in February of 18. And just talk about that decision to come back to Major League Baseball and pro baseball in the States and give it one more try.
Yeah, so I actually thought, the scouts that I worked with in Japan really liked me. I did my best to embrace the culture over there and embrace the players and everything. And so they openly discussed with me their referral to a couple Korean teams that reached out almost immediately after I was released in Japan. And I thought I was going to play in Korea in 2018. And so my agent and I decided to essentially not really pursue American baseball and really try to get back on overseas. And that didn't shake out. And so came mid-January, and kind of finally got the final word from one of the teams in Korea that they decided to go to a different direction, and kind of went into panic mode as I'd spent, the rest of the off season training for the 2018 season. And through a couple different channels, both me and my agent found kind of similar paths and ended up at the Indians. And it was a blessing for me to be able to sign with them. And they were a fantastic organization to play for. Probably the most player friendly that I played with, and considerate of you. And it was just it was a great experience, and turned out to be my last year. My initial goal in my career was to play till I was 34 and get 4 years in the big leagues. But after my season in 2018, there were many factors that played into me deciding that it was just time to move on past the game and do something else.
So your career ends in American Pro Ball in September of 2018. You're AAA Columbus. You said you kind of felt that it was time to move on to something else. When you threw your last pitch as a professional in the States, did you know that was your last pitch potentially?
Yeah, I had a pretty good feeling. A lot, like I said, a lot of factors. Both my grandparents had passed just a couple weeks before that. There was just, I felt the kind of transition from the ability to get ground balls to getting strikeouts, and the move towards analytics and the difficulty in actually finding a job, and kind of becoming the old guy in the clubhouse that, when I first broke into AAA, I was like, hey, that's the old guy in the clubhouse. He's here to, provide the young guys with some mentorship. And I was fine with that role. And I actually enjoyed it immensely. But all those things, kind of pointed to that. I finished, it was the last pitch of the last game. I threw a curveball, which was my signature pitch, and struck out a former big leaguer as well, in Jared Saltamamakia. And just a lot of things kind of pointed in that direction. And then on the drive home from Columbus back to Phoenix, I called my agent from Amarillo, Texas, and he asked me where I was and what I was doing. And he made the same decision in his pro career in Amarillo, Texas, some years before I did, after he dropped off his family in Amarillo and continued his drive back to California. So just a storm of events that kind of just pointed towards the end. And, I just felt like it was not worth the gamble of training for another 4 or 5 months in the off season in hopes to land a job and go to spring training and still the potential of getting cut without any guaranteed money. It was just time to hang him up and move on to whatever the next move was.
Well, you had a great run again from 2008 to 2018 in pro ball. You have a 4-6 record and 3 years off and on with the Dodgers. It sounds like you knew the end was there, and it sounds like you were at peace with that decision. Is that kind of how it played out? Were you pretty much comfortable and very at peace with your decision?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was just, I'd had a kid, second one on the way, and it was just one of those times. Or actually, I had 2 kids at that time. Yeah, the 2018 season was trying with a 2-year-old and a sub 1-year-old. So, it was just one of those times, and I definitely started to kind of shop around with the Indians and some other contacts I had to either go into the player development side, possibly the scouting side, and just really, really kind of sew up the playing career and find a different way of making ends meet.
Well, what a run. As I mentioned, 2008 to 2018 in pro ball, and a chance to pitch in the majors, which is a dream for everyone, and you hang things up. You've now moved back to Boise, Idaho, as you get into your career in commercial real estate. Before we talk about kind of the current day and some of the challenges facing professional ball players in the States with the COVID-19 shutdown, if you can't think back, Stephen, who is maybe the most interesting guy or a couple guys you met in the majors, coach or player, that you think, wow, that person was unique and really stood out to you?
Boy, the list is long. As I tell people, professional baseball is a game for grown children. So there's many a men that I spent a lot of hours with, a lot of days with, a lot of time with, that I would love to spend another 2 years in the clubhouse with. But from names that people would know, Brian Wilson was an absolute, he's a genius, literally like a brilliant genius. And and witty and smart. And Peter Moylan was another guy that I really got to be around a lot. I was a reliever, Australian guy that was as funny as they come. Tons of characters in the minor leagues, Jack Leathersich and Eamon Portis and some of those guys. But, and then you get some of the hard luck stories, right? And maybe not hard luck, but hard life stories where you've got, Jose Iglesias and his Cuban story and Yasiel Puig with his story and exit from Cuba. And then there's players like Adrian Gonzalez who came out of Mexico, and there's just so many characters in different ways and lives, and you really grow to understand that life doesn't happen in a mold. Not everybody gets to experience the same things, and so much to learn from all those guys. And then on the coaching side, a lot of ex-players and a lot of input from guys like Bob Kipper, who played in the 80s and early 90s. And boy, I could go on and on. The list, seriously, the list is a couple hundred names long, but it was an incredible experience to be around those guys and to live and breathe and eat and experience baseball at every turn for 8 months a year.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. It seems like in baseball, you have more characters in that sport. There's a lot of downtime. You're hanging out in the clubhouse. You're around each other every day for games and spring training, and it's a lifestyle that's unique, probably compared to any other sport. Just the situation with, I said, the amount of games and just the way the schedule plays out. But you hang it up after the 18 season, and you move back to Boise, and now you are in commercial real estate. So just talk about the decision to do that and how it's going for you.
Yeah. So the decision kind of just really hinged on I did my best as a player throughout my entire career, really, of kind of putting the bug in people's ears that I really love baseball, and that moving forward, when my career ends, I'd like to be in baseball. And so my goal essentially became to be somewhat of an assistant GM. Never really desired to be a GM, but an assistant to the GM would have been great. And the more I got into it and then had kids and a wife and a family, it became more apparent that a career in baseball really puts family and kids secondary to them. And I at that point decided, after speaking to some of the finest gentlemen I know, one of them, Aaron Seeley, long time 18-year major leaguer who's still in baseball, still scouting, a lot of his input, his experience from his family. And I just decided that I didn't want to go down that path. And so at that time I had pivoted back to a time when I was at Utah, and my cousin's wife does retail commercial real estate and had come down to Utah and treated me to dinner a couple times and introduced me to the thought process of doing commercial real estate. And so I decided after the 18 season, I decided to retire. And a couple months after that, decided that, baseball, it's just not going to be, it's not going to be the best move for me and my family. And especially for me as a father and as a husband, to put them in the forefront. So, I felt like it was time to put the selfish cards away and take baseball off the table and do something that's a little bit more conventional and still provides a good way of living, but allows them for me to be a boon to them instead of an anchor. So decided to go into commercial real estate. We moved back to Boise in February of 2019 after I got my real estate license in Arizona. And actually we're in the transition right now of going back to Arizona, where I will continue to do commercial real estate, but just do it in a different market than Boise, Idaho.
Well, very good. Both markets are growing and pretty lucrative, I imagine. So good decision by you. Before we wrap it up, Stephen, it was just a couple years ago, you were a guy in professional baseball, and this has been a challenging year for them, just like it has for all of us. But, just think about, had you been in baseball at this time, you go to spring training, the COVID-19 shutdown happens, and you're sitting around for months at a time, reading about the potential labor agreement. How many games will there be? Will there be a season at all? And how do they piece it together? And then the announcement recently that there's no minor league baseball this year. Guys like yourself would not have a chance to play unless you were on the roster of the big league club or in their pool of players that they were including. So, put yourself back in that position as a player a couple years ago. What would be going through your mind right now as you were sitting around and waiting to play and trying to gear up for a pro season that would start in late July, go 60 games. And if you were a minor leaguer knowing that, hey, I won't get a chance to play ball this year, what would you be thinking at this point?
Yeah, definitely would have been worried and calculating definitely the whole time since, they laid off spring training and made everybody continue to wait. Super unfortunate. I mean, for selfishly, right, I feel like I got out at the right time. Because, as a guy who, been around in the minor leagues for over 8 seasons, I definitely would have been those guys that, worked all off season, get my job, 2020, go to spring training, COVID hits. You think, well, maybe we'll be back in a few weeks and we'll get the season started, and they cancel the minor league season. And it's such a devastating blow to all those minor leaguers who are not, basically not top 3, not top 5 round draft picks in the last 3 or 4 years. So any of those veteran guys that, I played against in AAA the last, 3 or 4 years who are now, without jobs and really looking forward without any opportunity ahead. So super unfortunate for those guys, even the lower minor league level guys. You kind of look back now, at least I've had the discussion with a couple buddies of mine, the commissioner going back into the 2019 season, I think actually the 2018 season when the discussion started about how much it costs owners to have such extensive minor league systems. And so there was a movement 2017, 2018, 2019 to kind of limit that. And now it gives, COVID now gives ownership and Major League Baseball kind of the stepping stone to eliminate some, all, half. I don't know how much of minor leagues they'll actually eliminate, but it's kind of a rite of passage and a development system that's really going to just kind of go away. And it's going to, from what I understand, going to turn into like 3 levels. It's going to be A ball, AA, AAA, and that's it. So you're going to limit the minor leagues now going forward to about half of what it was. From the major league standpoint, definitely if you're a guy that's on a major league contract, I mean, you were definitely involved in the negotiations and the union was involved in that. And I've still got buddies that are doing that and are heavily involved in what's going on there and how it all shook out, the negotiations between the two. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of uncertainty for those who didn't have the funds or the means to go back home and continue to train. They're obviously in a different physical shape. Established players probably have gyms in their house and ability to take cuts or pitch or whatever in their backyards. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. 60 games definitely is going to present a ton of urgency. I think everybody's referenced, right, the Nationals last year, who started off the year like 17-31 and won the World Series. You're not going to have that story this year.
Nope.
And the leashes are going to be short, and it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of movement towards different ways to play the game, and I'm somewhat of a traditionalist given the era that I played in, and those who I was surrounded with early in my career and in the big leagues. That the game's been played like this, and it should be played like this, and now there's going to be a ton of excuses why to change the game and to speed it up and to limit things and do things different. It could be beneficial for the game moving forward, but I think it's going to be short-sighted on a lot of fronts, I believe.
You see that a lot, Stephen, where there's ideas kind of kicked around and then something happens that gives you an excuse or a reason to implement those. And you talked about some of the things as far as scaling back minor league baseball, this situation now of putting a runner on second when they go to extra innings in the majors. That'll be a rule this year.
Right.
A lot of changes that will happen. Do you see maybe this thing of the extra innings rule sticking? Do you see some other things maybe sticking? I mean, they've been talking for years about maybe a shorter major league season, deeper playoffs, more teams going to playoffs like we'll have the next couple of years. Do you think any of those things will stick once we get a couple of years down the road?
Yeah, I think they will. I hope they don't, but I think they will.
Yeah.
I mean, I played in the minors when they were implementing the runner on second, which I think to some degree makes sense for the minors, but for the major leagues, especially being a guy that was the beneficiary of long extra inning games and being able to pull up a 26th man for the doubleheader and the doubleheader going long, and then them having to make a move to bring a pitcher in to pitch that next game.
Right.
I think it's at the cost of the guys who aren't there yet, in my opinion. So those longer games, specifically those longer games is what provides opportunity for guys that are in AA and AAA to get called up to the big leagues. So I think that's unfortunate. It's appropriate, but they're going to probably move to that, and it's going to shorten the games. The season again is the same kind of. It's a game of attrition. When I was in the minor league, I can remember getting pulled aside by many front office members being like, "This is a next man up game." Even more so than the NFL, even more so than the NBA, even more so than hockey. Like, there are so many games and so many opportunities for guys who didn't prepare to go down, or who did prepare and had an unfortunate event happen, that the next guy has to be ready. And so if you limit the minor leagues and you shorten the season, it's just limiting the opportunity for almost everybody, except for those who got there fortunately and were able to establish and stay a long time. So it's, I don't know. I'm kind of out on a lot of the changes, but that's just, I guess, a more traditionalist look. And it'll be interesting to see what changes happen going forward and how they impact the game. And if they do impact the game significantly, hopefully it becomes a more entertaining game and still is a game that people want to watch and talk about and experience.
There's been talk for years, Steve, of expanding baseball's postseason, and now the next couple of years you'll have 8 teams in each league in the playoffs. People love postseason baseball. They love postseason of any sport. Do you like the idea? I mean, you talk about baseball tradition. It's been about very few teams get in. I mean, I remember before the wild card came in, and it was so hard to make the postseason. You have a team that got hot late, or had a very good record, but because they're behind someone in their division, did not make the postseason. Do you like expanding to 8 teams in each league and 16 total the next couple of years?
I do like that quite a bit. I think that at the end of the year, right, is when things really happen and teams start to figure it out. Or they remove some veterans that maybe weren't beneficial to the team, or they bring in some new blood. I mean, the biggest worry with the Dodgers, right, was when we'd go play, the Padres or the Rockies or something like that. They'd call up 6 or 7 guys from AAA and start, 3 or 4 guys and a pitcher that were not on the roster until, August 15th. And those are the guys that come up to prove themselves, and they give you a run for your money. So yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to see more teams more teams in the playoffs, and it's just exciting. I mean, postseason, anything is exciting. I hope they don't do the 1 game thing. I think I feel like the 1 game playoff of the wild card is just it's too just bone chilling. It just crushes, it just people. So I hope a 3-series game is the minimum. I'd be fine if you lose twice, then you go home. But the 1 game playoff is just ruthless, especially after playing 162 to bring it down to 1 game. But yeah, the more the better. I think it'll expand. I would definitely be fine if they expanded the playoffs and shortened the season. I think that makes a ton of sense. Gives go to like 140, 150 games instead of 162, and now you've got more teams in the playoffs, more time to play, more games that matter, and more fan support. I think those games are almost guaranteed to sell out, and cities get involved, and economies get the benefit of all the influx of people coming to see those games. So I think that's a really, really good move in the right direction.
I'll agree with you on the elimination of the 1 game and the wild card. You play all those games to get there, and then they have 1 game decide your fate. You either win and go on, or else you lose and go home. I agree. A minimum 3-game series is the way to go. Let's talk about the deal overall. I mean, there was a lot of talk about, the players wanted more games, obviously. The owners said, well, we have this agreement. We're not going to pay you your full rate for more than 60 or whatever. There was a lot of back and forth, and it got ugly for a long time. To have them settle on your full salary for 60 games, did you like that deal, or were you hoping maybe for a few more games, a little more give and take on the owner's side?
Yeah. So, I mean, having been in the union, right, and really being fairly loyal to that, it's very difficult. I mean, and this is a really broad, wide net cast here, but it's billionaires versus millionaires.
Yep.
And maybe that's not the most appropriate representation, but we were presented while I was in the union and being in those meetings that owners' revenue has gone up like exponentially for the last 25 years, from whatever the amount was, up to, say a 35% increase, if that's the number that I can remember as the last, that from like 2000 to 2012, their revenue had increased like 30%, 35%, and player salaries had gone up on average like 3 to 5% in the same time.
Wow.
And so the curve really started to kind of separate itself, right, where owners were really starting to make a lot more than players. And then you get to this year's negotiations, and they're, as far as I understood it, talking about revenue, and more specifically gate revenue. And at that point, I think the general public doesn't realize that the majority of the money made by owners is not from the gate; it's from TV contracts. And the TV contracts were in place and will be paid, especially if the teams play. And so to ask the players to take part in revenue sharing on the gate really, to me, never added up, because the money's coming from the TV contracts. So I think the players had the right to, and I think that the owners are the ones that, in my opinion, and I don't have any insight on really either side, but it seems that the owners really held this thing up to limit costs and possibly losses, even though they've made a fortune in the many years past, and really weren't willing to sacrifice, the 2020 season and pay to get the game back. And, hopefully the repercussions aren't long and strenuous, but it doesn't seem to me to be. I think the players had agreed from the get-go to get paid per game. You pay me my salary per game for every game we play. And I think that's a very reasonable stance to take on guaranteed contracts. And I definitely don't think it's reasonable for the owners to bring in the gate revenue and try to split that with the players as part of the salary.
I'm with you. I felt like baseball missed a golden opportunity during this shutdown. I mean, there were talks about starting sooner, around July 4th, and just figure out the salary somehow. I mean, owners, as you said, have made a lot of money. Dig into those reserves and give us more than just 60 games, and give America a chance to watch something and be into something during the shutdown when we're all sitting around and we're just, loving the idea of live sports to watch. And instead we're down to just 60 games and a very, very short run in a sport that normally has 162. So I felt like they missed a chance to do something special. And we are where we are with that as we get things going on July 23rd. As you watch games now, Stephen, as a guy who's been there, who played in pro ball for 11 years, how do you watch the sport? I mean, are you thinking through pitchers doing their work? Do you just kind of sit back and really not lock into the strategy and just kind of, overall enjoy the game? You sit there with your kids and watch with them. What's it like to watch a professional baseball game now for you after 11 years playing at that level?
Watching the game purely from an entertainment standpoint is virtually impossible. So I've watched far too many games and dug out and worked through scenarios and yelled at umpires and players and opposing players and coaches and gotten, emotionally invested and involved far too much to be able to just completely remove myself from the strategy and the experience of a 9-inning game. And so I will not be the dad who yells at my kids from the stands or yells at coaches or umpires from the stands. That won't be the guy that I am. But, watching professional baseball from the couch is definitely, I just can't help it. I just get involved in the experience and the count and who's on and where their holes are and swing recognition and, what pitch makes sense where. And yeah, I find myself definitely highly involved in the game. And, still wanting to bring my boys in and, check this out, try to teach them the situations. They're too young to do that, but definitely watch baseball with borderline the same attention to detail as I did when I was playing.
It's a great game, isn't it?
I can respect the fact that those who aren't entertained and don't want to go through the process, who don't have the experience with it, I can appreciate that they don't have the attention span or the background to watch a game with intent. But for those who do and enjoy it, I appreciate every baseball fan and whether they're cheering for a team that I cheer for, a player that I cheer for, a buddy that I know, or a coach that I played for, whatever it was. I I appreciate all baseball fans and their willingness and ability to sit down for 3 or 4 hours and really pay attention and get into a game and enjoy it.
Well, Stephen, it was a great run for you. I mean, to make it to the show for the parts of 3 years and to spend 11 years in pro ball in the United States, that's a dream come true right there. And I know for the Utah program, you've been gone for quite a while, but you were one of those guys that kind of got things going. As I mentioned, 11 guys from Utah now taking first 10 rounds of the draft since you went to start things back in 2008. And you know how recruiting works. I mean, Brian Conger and Bill Kinneberg and the guys who followed up Conger have all used you as kind of the idea of, hey, come to Utah, you could be the next Stephen Fife and make it. It certainly helped this program grow and to watch them in the Pac-12 championship a couple years ago and be on solid footing. You were a big part of that as you got the foundation for Kinneberg laid. So, Stephen, we appreciate the time and sounds like you've settled in well to your next thing in commercial real estate as you make the move back to Arizona. Thanks for joining us and best of luck to you.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed my time at Utah. I definitely wouldn't trade that period of my life for much of anything. So thank you for having me and a pleasure being a part of the Ute family still.
All right, that's Stephen Fife, former Utah pitcher from 2007 to 2008. Back to wrap things up in just a moment.
For more on Utah athletics, including up-to-date schedules and ticket information, log on to utahutes.com. Now back to more of Utes Insider presented by Pepsi.
To put into perspective what Stephen Fife has accomplished, think about this. Just 5.6% of high school baseball players move on to the college level. 0.5% of high school baseball players are drafted into the majors. So very, very few get there. Stephen Fife talked about how Tommy John surgery in 2014 really derailed his career at a point when maybe he was going to get his best chance to be a day-to-day starter in the majors. It did not happen, but still to last 11 years in pro baseball, to pitch in the majors, parts of 3 seasons, that's a great career. And we appreciate Stephen Fife for dropping by to talk to us on Utes Insider, presented by Pepsi. Well, coming up next week, we continue to focus on Utes and their role in the return to playing professional sports. Will Manny, an assistant lacrosse coach at Utah, is ready to begin playing the Professional Lacrosse League Championship Series taking place at Zions Bank Stadium in Harriman from July 25th through August 9th. And we will also talk to Will about the process of building the Utah program at the NCAA Division I level the last few years. Will Manny coming up next week. We hope you join us for that. Until then, I'm Mike Lagashow. Thanks for joining us. So long, everybody.
This has been Utes Insider presented by Pepsi. To hear more episodes of this show and other Utah athletics podcasts, search for them on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.